So I'm going to jump a little bit quicker through the proposal stuff since the proposal has changed. The proposal has changed a little bit, and just want to give a little bit of a synopsis on the whole change of the proposal. What we were realizing, Dr. York and I, about the bigger proposal, which still has work, and some students still choose to do the 25-page proposal, but the new, more condensed proposal is such because a lot of the things that you were putting into or needed to put into the longer proposal, you have to replicate anyways in the first 3 chapters, right? So what we realized was a better interest or usefulness for both faculty and students was to get a 10-page proposal from you where you indicate your ideas in the first 4 pages, really. And this is structured out, right? We have a template for this. And actually, the research methodology, we're giving you the default Monarch research methodology to use. So when you get to writing the first 3 chapters of the dissertation, and you get to chapter 3, by that time you might have more experience, you have more understanding for the research methodology, and you might choose to change it a little bit with your supervisor, which is fine. But we're giving you already, this is how we prefer most of the research at Monarch to proceed in this, research methodology, what we call the Monarch standard research methodology, which is typically a mixed method research methodology. And we'll go through that. But what we were doing previously with the big proposal was we were saying, okay, in this section, write up your research methodology, right? Okay, well, you've done the quantitative and the qualitative, and there was the textbooks on research methodology, and that was proving to take a lot of time, and that time should be better spent actually in the dissertation, writing up the methodology for the dissertation, not for necessarily for the proposal, right? The proposal, what it's meant to do is give a roadmap for the faculty and the students, to give, as you say, a schedule, which we have a default schedule now as well over 36 months. This is how your research should pan out, right? So we're a little bit prescriptive way of doing it. A budget, which can be whatever you think it will cost for you to carry out your research. And so really what you have to focus on in the new research proposal is about 4 pages of narrative of the logic of what type of research you want to do and why you want to do it, and who are some of the main authors and things like this. And then you have about 3 pages of the research methodology, you have the timeline, and you have the budget, then it's done, right? So you get into actually writing the thesis proper a lot quicker, okay? And so we think it has a lot more worth. So some of these slides are still oriented to the old or the 25-page format. But this is a really interesting slide. And what this slide is showing, I think I mentioned it a little bit, but just to go over it again, is in a lot of schools, when you go into doctoral studies, your dissertation topic is not set by you. So Dr. Eager, who I mentioned as my teacher from McGill, when he went to the University of British Columbia in real estate studies for his PhD, they told him his topic. They gave him a database of 50,000 mortgages from the United States, and they said, analyze it. And he said, well, what kind of analysis do you want me to do? I said, we don't care. Analyze it. That's the thesis. You figure out what the analysis should be. You've got the data on 50,000 mortgages, right? Okay, so he ended up doing analysis of cost of capital and such certain type of thing. But he said his first 6 months he walked around in a daze, going like, what am I going to do with all this data? I got all this raw data. What am I going to do with all this data? I got all this raw data, right? Okay. So I guess you could argue that that's a little bit in between the two. They gave him the data and they said, okay, you figure out what to do with it, right? In some respects, you go, you say you want to study HR, right? So you go to the director of the HR department at the university and you say, will you take me on as a doctoral student? He says, sure, as long as you want to study CEO cash compensation, right? I'm more than happy to take you on. Oh, well, I'm actually really interested in communication in HR and, coaching. No, I'm not interested in that. Yeah, you'll have to find somebody in another school or another one of my colleagues, right? So what happens? Before you even get accepted into the program, you're running around like a little dog looking for a treat, right? And you're going up to every different person. Do you have a treat in your pocket for me? Do you have a treat in your pocket for me? Will you take me on as a student? Will you take me on as a student, right? So, very frustrating, right? And quite frankly, it's because the universities only have so many resources, and they want you to find a resource. Now, this works, it typically works when the student is a master's student at the university, and they're already under a professor, right? And then the professor says, hey, you should do your doctoral study, here. And they say, okay, so I'll write up my proposal, and they send it in, and it already has the blessing, if you will, of the existing supervisor, right? And they say, yeah, well, he's already agreed to be my supervisor, right? So it cultivates the students who are already in the institution, right? But when you come from outside and you're trying to find, you are shaking your head up and down, so you must have had some experience with that, or
supervisors.
No, like trying to find a supervisor in another.
I had a lot. When I was trying to get enrolled into the university, I contacted about 60 universities in Europe, asking about the opportunity to become a PhD student. The first question which I got from them, have you got supervisor from our university? I said no. They said, so find it. If you don't find, you are not going to be enrolled. So, and then I just emailing the professors. Some of them are out on vacations. Some of them received my email into spam folder. So
right. And another said, I'm sure you're looking for my twin brother.
Yeah.
Me. And very frustrating. So, set by the faculty or set by the student. When you do possibly find a supervisor, often they say, okay, Anastasia, you're really interested in, you're interested in publishing, you're interested in publishing industry. I'm kind of interested in the publishing industry, but I'm interested in the publishing industry insofar as new digital technologies are concerned. Are you willing to shift over a little bit into my area, and then I can take you on, right? So then you get this negotiation going on. And what happens with that? Well, Anastasia feels like, well, I want to get into university. I want to start my PhD. Okay, maybe she goes back. She thinks about it for a couple of days, and okay, I'm willing to switch over. 6 months later, I really don't like this topic. It doesn't keep her interest. Keeps the interest of the supervisor. Doesn't keep her interest, and therefore the 3 years to 36 months of the dissertation ends up being the stories that we always hear. Right? I didn't like it, my supervisor this, I'm so happy it's over. Set by the students, right? Student has various interests and look for a supervisor that can oversee their study. Not as common. Set by the faculty, typical method. So the method used at Monarch is student comes to us and says, I'm interested in doing this. We don't even force you to have your topic when you apply, right? Because, quite frankly, you've got 6 months to figure out what your topic's going to be. You have to take your research methods courses, right, which are 3 months and 3 months when you're in the thesis program. If you're in the DBA, you've got about 18 months of coursework anyways that you're being exposed to with different topics, right? And so some people actually, they think they're coming in with one topic and then they realize, within the first months that it's actually not what they want to study. They want to study something else. Right? So there's a little bit of change that can happen as well. Okay, but we accept students in as they, as I mentioned earlier. Typically, the general domain that you're interested in. Right? You're interested in HR. We all know that you're interested in HR now. You're most likely going to do a thesis on HR, right? Unless HR takes you into maybe something just next door to HR, right? So, well, I'm interested in HR and sustainability, and then that transforms itself by the end of your thesis into something that's more just sustainability. That's possible, right? So some of that can happen, right? But we typically have an idea of what we want to study when we come into the school, then we just have to refine it. So we try to find a supervisor as close to your domain as possible. But remember what we said, your supervisor does not need to be your domain expert. It's nice if they are and they have a lot of knowledge on it, but the supervisor is there to help you through the research process and the doctoral process. They're not there to teach you your domain. So as I mentioned earlier, they're not going to give you a list of reading materials and say, here's the people in sustainability that you should be reading, right? That's for you to go out and do, right? The supervisor's there and ask, Rita, what did you do last week? What did you go out? Did you find some of your reading materials? Did you write out, did you sketch out the structure of your thesis yet? Did you start working on chapter 1? Are you on track? Rita, what's going on? Right? I mean, that's the role of the supervisor, right? And then when she's got materials ready in a form that's, readable, not just draft, but fairly good readable stuff, and she submits it, the supervisor reads it, returns it with comments, or says, good work, keep it up, you should change this, you should think about that. How's this going to work with the final structure? I don't understand what you're doing here. Your thoughts are unclear here. Things like that, right?
Question.
Yep. Oh, sorry?
Yeah, I just want to get back on the dissertation topic said by the faculty. I believe that there are some drivers behind those structures or those decisions taken by the university, because sometimes they funding.
Yeah, for sure.
Funding from some organizations or from some companies, and
yeah, so they want students on those topics.
yeah. So are we saying here that that won't happen to Monarch one of these days?
Well, I don't necessarily think so, because as a private university, most of the cost of the program is being funded by the student, right? We don't accept monies from government agencies, right? So you're coming here and you're paying for your studies, right? There's nothing that follows you around like, oh, that student represents another $50,000 that came from the Swiss government or whatever, which in some universities that's the case. You're only paying a portion of what the total cost of your study is, and they're getting money per student that they have in the school, right? Or if you're in research that a professor has and he's being supported by a company or whatever, that's also how it works. But here you're coming, you're a private university, you're paying for your tuition, you're choosing what you're going to study, right? And we allocate a professor as close as possible to your domain for you. That's the model we work with. Whether it's going to
What if, for instance, you get approached by a company or by an organization?
by a very rich prince who wants me to study.
And they get, let's say, much more interested in the way Monarch works, and they want Monarch to work on some subject. And in that case, how do you plan to deal with it?
Well, I think in such a case, it's hypothetical, but in such a case, the way to approach it is you create a research center, right? So students would still be doing their own research, and you would have professors that within the circle of a research center would be carrying out research for such an organization, for instance. Now, it's possible that a professor, if he's being funded, can post on our website to say there's an open PhD position in this type of research. Anybody wants to apply for it, right? If it's going to be funded, right? That's a possibility. I wouldn't say that that's not a possibility. But I would not force a paying student to change their topic because a professor or there's some funding by another company or such, right? If you, as a paying student in a private institution, you choose what you want to do, right? Not sure.
But if I understand this point, for instance, he is with the UK. Okay, so if for instance there's an issue or problem that before that should be researched into, and then he being privy to that information, so that maybe there is a funding for this kind of research,
Yeah,
and then he would like Mona, to supervise that research.
right. Well, that would be that's a different situation to me than the students if the students is bringing funding with them through an outside organization, there's no problem with that. But then it would still be his topic though, right? So you would still, because you wouldn't be doing a topic that you didn't want to do just because there's funding. Well, maybe some would do it. The alternative is, I want to study my topic, but I don't have the money to pay. I don't have the resources for it, but my organization wants to study. Maybe you're not interested in leadership, but they want to have a study done in leadership or whatever. She said, okay, you know what? For the purposes of the PhD getting funded, I'm going to study leadership, right? Because again, think about it. The domain, the stuff that you're actually studying. Yes, it's good to have an interest in it, but it's all about the process and learning how to do research, right? Learn how to sail a boat. Well, you can sail a lot of different crafts once you learn how to sail, right? And that's the same thing for research. So sometimes students will get into a PhD program specifically, which maybe is not their interest, but because it's being funded and they're able to get an education. You can't fault anybody for that, right? Okay. Important questions to ask is why is the research important? What's known about the research? How will the research proceed? And I have 2 points here. It's always about the research, not about the researcher. And whether you are doing the research or another researcher is doing it, it's immaterial, meaning it's always about the researcher. So sometimes students like to write in their thesis or their dissertation, I chose to take down this topic because I have experience in this industry. Nobody cares, right? I think that nobody cares what you think, right? You're a doctoral student, you didn't graduate yet, right? What we're interested in are points that are referenced points. So when you make an argument, you're backing your argument up with references to authors that also think that way, right? Now, you're not just repeating what other authors are saying, but you're repeating it in a way that's a novel way. So you're bringing different authors together and making points and supporting those points, right? Now, when you write your dissertation, when you never say I, or me, or we. You're always writing. Instead of saying, I believe that, you have to write something like, the evidence demonstrates that. So you're always about the research. The research shows that, you wouldn't start off the sentence by saying, I think the research demonstrates that. We don't care, I am saying it very casually. We don't care what you think. Of course we care what you think, but don't put yourself in the center of the sentence, right? We want you to put the research at the center of the sentence. Okay?
Can I add something there? And don't, in your proposals, announce what you think the conclusions of your research are going to be. You go in with an open mind. You announce what your questions are that you're going to research, but you don't announce in advance what you think the answers are going to be. For a start, because you may be wrong.
Yeah, and Dr. Lee is saying that because typically when we're thinking of a topic or writing a proposal, we already have our assumptions as to what we think is right or wrong. Right? And again, what's right or wrong is not the issue. But then we start writing to that. And you have to be careful not to do that, right? You're just writing about, from a proposal standpoint, you're writing about research that is going to happen, right? Okay, why the proposal is important for the university. Again, it just shows expectations. It's a roadmap, it's a design, gets everybody on the same page. Everybody's in agreement with what's going to happen. Now, for the case of Monarch, once you do your proposal, the proposal can change a little bit, right? And we understand that, 6 months down the line, your orientation might change a little, right? So again, the proposal, like the dissertation, the proposal is a little mini project. You gotta just write the proposal, say this is what I'm planning on doing. And then once you start doing the research and you modify off that a little bit, as long as your supervisor is happy with it, that's fine. If it ends up being a major change, like you say, I was studying HR, but now I want to study electrical engineering, well, guess what, we got a problem, right? You know, even if you say it's HR and I've decided I'm going into the marketing side, it's still a problem, right? Okay, so it's got to still be within the general thing that you announced you wanted to do, but there is some wiggle room, right? Okay. If it's a material difference, then we probably get you to write another proposal and resubmit or whatever. But even in that case, it's a possibility, right? Now you just have to remember, if you get 6 months, 8 months, 12 months into your research, and this does happen to some students, and it happened to me. My first 6 months, I threw it out because I changed my research completely, right? You get down the line and you realize this is not the methodology I want to use. It's not what I want to do. I want to do something different, right? And then you go back to your supervisor and you say, listen, I realize that I want to do this in a different way. It's pretty significantly different. I'm going to have to throw out what I've already done to start anew. Okay, do you realize this is going to extend your study by 6 months? Yes, but I really want to do it this way. Okay, fine. Fine. But there's consequences to making that change, right? I'm not saying you can't make that change. You're not locked in to it. After a certain period of time, you can't make any more changes, right? If you're in your 12th month and you're going to decide to completely change your research, right? Well, are you prepared to toss out a whole year? You know, that's pretty serious, right? So after a certain point, you have what you have, and you just continue to plow through, okay? The proposal, especially the larger proposal, is always tricky, and this is what you're going to find in your first 3 chapters. You have to learn how to do the proper formatting, right? Which you'll see in the mini proposal even. You're going to have to learn content, and you're going to have to learn writing style. So formatting the document, what to put in the document, right? And also the writing style, like I was saying, don't use I. There's many things that we point out not to do when you're actually writing. So you're not simply preparing a document in order to move on to research. You actually have to demonstrate that you know how to prepare an academic document, right? So now it's just a 10-pager, and we give you the template. So we're teaching you this is what an academic template looks like. Add in the first 4 pages, change some of the other material. This is a good-looking academic formatted document format. Okay, and that's the same formatting that you use in your dissertation. And Dr. York's dissertation is up there as an example. Dr. Majbalani's is up there, full completed thesis work as examples of formatting. Okay, always has to be super clean, error-free, punctuation well, that sort of stuff. Proper formatting through and through. Some schools, I'm telling you right now, are hyper strict on this stuff, okay? Some professors, in a defense, when they get the manuscript, because many, we accept the digital manuscript first, right? But many schools still, you have to give your hard copy in when you're at the defense. First thing you do is flip to the references, the bibliography. Is the bibliography formatted correctly, right? Hey, look at that. He's not formatting the bibliography correctly to APA standards. Go back, redo it. See you next time. Right? So imagine the feeling of writing a whole dissertation, and for a technicality, right, they send you back. And that means come back minimum 6 months later, right? Okay, so, and the reason why I'm stressing that is nobody likes formatting. It's tedious, right? You have to develop a meticulous mindset to do it, and it takes time, okay? But it is an essential element of the dissertation. So get it into your minds straight away that it's something that you have to take care of, okay? You're looking at me already like, I don't want to hear about things.
That was
And I know that guy who wears such a cool shirt like that wants to hand in a very cool looking document. And,
No, I had this formatting.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had this formatting problem. In fact, it was, I remember when my proposal got sent back just for this technicalities to say, and everything was clear, but just for formatting, I had to almost, do the thing, the work. And in fact, it wasn't me, it was actually the computer, because everything's just, you have to,
the computer.
because you have to select the computer. No, hold on. When you do your work, you select the bibliographic page where you say APA, and you expect the computer to do everything for you. And that's what I did. It came back, the bad way. I sent it to the faculty, and then they returned it.
She's about to justification.
Pardon?
The justification.
Yeah.
You still insist on the expression of one side left hand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why do you discourage
At
this?
the end, I think, oh, I'm doing
No, because a full carriage.
Full looks smarter.
No, full carriage is business writing. It's just for business writing, typically.
You still insist on
Full carriage to me drives me crazy because it reminds me of the original computer dot matrix printers, I want it to look like a book. I want to be taken on a literary journey, Dixon. It's less justified. Most thesis works are less justified. I want a thesis.
Yeah, I was about to ask, is there any tool or software to guide people, to help people to...
His dissertation, Dr. Mangelati's dissertation.
I think there is a handbook.
Yeah, there's a handbook.
There's a handbook.
Okay.
But really, I mean, and actually, I think one of the two, I actually had the doc file for theirs as well. So essentially, you could take their thesis, just zap out some of the wordage, and you'd still have the structure of it, right? I toyed around with, quite frankly, of putting a full template there for the students, so that it's brain dead simple, Here's the template with headings and how they should be structured and everything. But then what ends up happening is that you don't learn to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'd rather you guys learn how to do it, even though it causes me pain and anguish.
They're a thought for previous generations, everything was done on typewriter.
Yeah, imagine that. Everything on typewriter. And then they said, oh, you're not formatted properly, retype it all. So you have those three things. You always got to take in mind supervisor. Okay, just some things. The supervisor is concerned with the format of proposals and dissertations. The supervisor's responsibility to make certain that any proposal or dissertation research submitted by you conforms to the regulations. The supervisors are not really very good at checking your work for formatting, It's your responsibility to make sure things are formatted properly. So that's the last thing on their list. The responsibility for content and meeting the formatting standards remains with you and nobody else, okay?
Clarification.
No.
The issue of references as opposed to bibliography.
No, the bibliography, just to be clear, the bibliography is the actual end document at the end of the thesis.
Yes.
The bibliographic entries, right? The referencing is the reference that goes either at the end of the sentence or end of the quote. Now, some people call the bibliography the references, but it's incorrect to say that. It's the bibliography, right? Now, the confusion is on Word. They will also have one of the styles, instead of bibliography, they'll say cited.
Works cited. Yeah.
Okay. So that gets confusing too, because cited works makes it sound like references, right?
Yeah, but the way I understand it is that bibliography means you include everything, even what you have not cited in the main.
No, only what you've cited, only what you've referenced.
That is reference.
Only that you've referenced, yeah. If you've read something, you have not included a reference to that work in your dissertation, you cannot put it in the bibliography.
I think the confusion arises
That's the other
because Because in academic journals, generally, you write at the end of an article in an academic journal references. But on the dissertation,
Yeah.
in all areas, to call it.
You follow what I said, Ethan, is that, so you have the reference, right? So when you type out, you type out a thought that, you know, say Drucker said, and you put, you know, Drucker P, you know, 1976. And then that will, Word, as long as you use the reference wizard in Word, for instance, will automatically put it into your bibliography, right? So, but what you can't do is, let's say you've read Drucker's original work on management of the General Motors that he did, but you don't use any of that, right? You can't slide that into the bibliography and say, well, I read that as well, so that should go to my bibliography, you know? I suppose you could make an argument because you say, well, it still had an effect on me when I was writing my dissertation, but you haven't referenced any particular material from that document into your thesis, and that's what the bibliography is concerned with. So when the rule of thumb is one reference per page for your dissertation. Now that doesn't mean one reference on each page. That means if you have a 300-page document, you have 300 unique references, 300 unique bibliographic entries in your thesis, okay, in your dissertation. She said it first, blame her, minimum. Okay, so typically the defills have to be a minimum of 250 pages. Okay, that's where we're at. Now we have people falling in between 250 and 300 pages. If it's more than 300 pages, everybody gets tired. You know, you get reader fatigue. Nobody wants to read that much, okay? If it's less than 250, it's most likely because your literature review section is too weak. Your literature review section, I'm going to go through this later, but literature review section should be about 100 pages, okay? All right, so the bibliographic entries should be, so if you're at 250 pages, you have 250 unique references. So if you use Drucker, and you're referencing Drucker after you make a couple of points, you reference him 5 times, that's 1. Right? It's unique authors. Right? I know, that sounds scary. Rita's looking at me like, are you serious, man? I came all the way from Ghana for this torture? And Monarch only uses APA. Now, one of the things we were discussing recently in APA 6, and I think it's APA 6.08 or something like this, but they started to allow students to use the first person, I, in the dissertation. Do not do that. I will put you in the stockade if you do that, okay? The other thing to remember is that we use APA referencing. We do not use the APA style guide, okay? So other universities just tell the students APA style guide, so their dissertation is actually the dissertation standards that APA talk about. 1 inch on this side, 1 inch on this side, 1 inch up here, 1 inch up here, Times New Roman, everything. APA just keep a standard like that for dissertations, right? We don't use that. We use our own style, which we've developed, right? But we use APA formatting, okay? Right?
Can I just put a footnote on the question of length? Length is not enhanced by repetition.
And everything.
In other words, if you're thinking, well, I've got to write 250 pages, well, that's all right.